Jonathan?
Good morning. I've got good news.
Oh, okay.
Right, we'll take any good news we can, and more than on one front. More than one thing is happening, of course, often, and one of them is that Don Juan Moses' father finally got acquitted.
Oh, I saw that on Facebook. That is good news. He's posted several pictures of him with his father and celebrating his acquittal and his freedom.
So I called last evening after getting the notice in a group text through Messenger, since he pulled away from me in part because he was afraid of publicity. He disconnected with me in some respects from Messenger, but he contacted a whole group with whom he remained attached after cutting me off individually, if I recall correctly. But so I responded, and he said yes, it's true, or whatever, something like that. And I called, and I could tell there was a lot of noise, like they were having a party last night, and we're just very grateful. I sent a message to the Toussaints, and Candide wrote back and said, "My heart is heavy with emotions as I see the innocence in the eyes of that man." And I thought it couldn't have been put better. She's very succinct about how she, as is Jean. They're both very articulate and just wonderful friends. And they know how I've worked with Don Juan Moses and how he pulled away from me, knowing that freedom of the press, fearing that freedom of the press would hurt their case.
I can understand that, especially with the way the press is these days. There are a lot of people in the press who don't deal with telling the truth.
Well, in my case, I was willing to tell their story, obviously, and they didn't want to hear it because I was telling the truth, and it could jeopardize their case. They thought, see. But their case is sort of...
All right, well, that's what I'm saying, because there are other people in the press who will take the words of someone who's telling the truth and turn it around and distort it, and that can be very harmful to people.
Which brings me to an interesting thing I've heard now from two different people. Crystal Nuttall, somebody I'd met through a network marketing thing, one of my scam things I tried years ago, but met this interesting woman who you've met now, Crystal Nuttall, who advocates for, children oppressed by the Child Protective Services system. In Arizona, you've seen some of her things that are very spot on. I want to interview her because she is such a voice for freedom as a Christian, and I'm sure you'll love her as well. I've never met her, never spoke with her, but she wants to do an interview. But Crystal Nuttall brought to my attention something that was also somewhere else. Oh yes, Facebook. They're suggesting, she and also my friend Michael Schwerzer suggested that we move from Facebook to another platform. And it's called Parler. That's one's a replacement for Twitter. And there's another one that's a replacement for Facebook. So everyone is about to get off, all the Trumpers are going to get off of these other media sites, apparently, or many of them will be conducting a mass exodus onto other platforms that are not infected by politically correct fact checkers.
Interesting.
Well, very, very interesting and very, very promising. And one of them is Parler,
Parlay.
Yeah, parlay, but in French, parlay,
Which
right?
is French to speak.
Correct. In Spanish is, I almost remember, but I can't. But look, the fact is that you have other sites as well that they refer you to, news sites, some of which you're familiar with, others not. So there's a full list. At some point I'll get to you. But I think I'm going to go out to see the Pemaquid Lighthouse now, because I'm in Damariscotta. Why not enjoy what I have here rather than go long distance back to, other areas? I'm a firm believer in economizing on gas and just using my car when I need it, especially since it's my domicile and I only have so much in the bank if anything breaks. So I'm treating this odyssey with kid gloves. It's all I have,
Right.
But I have more in my bank account than I've had in a long time. That because of the losing my shirt with Tamara Clark and Don Juan Moses, I'm finished with going as far as I did that way, because I end up sleeping in a tent at the Toussaint house, with vermin trying to get into my domicile. So those days, I hope, are over, at least for the time being, until we hit the time of trouble, the apocalyptic times when we'll all be together heading for the hills, you know. You will have had very good training, don't you worry, sis.
Okay.
Hey, I can imagine your parents chuckling if they heard that one, because they want you to be happy, you know. Your parents do want you to be happy.
Oh, a lot of people have said that, but
Well,
you know,
yeah, but they unfortunately were.
their actions speak otherwise. So,
Who? Your parents?
just all the people who've said, "I want you to be happy."
No, I'm talking about your parents, though. Their actions didn't speak otherwise, did they?
Again, it's, I don't know anymore, Jonathan.
It's a tough one. I understand when your parent, but look, I face the same thing. Look, my mother's friend in the choir, I think I've told you, Jeffrey Conrad, son of the Allen the Total Bookshop owners that were famous for their shop, their little beautiful store overlooking Camden Harbor. They did an impeccable job with a bookstore there that moved across the street under new management later, reappeared after a decade or two, you know, out of business. But Jeffrey Conrad on the Episcopal Church choir told me one day when I was at church with my mother, "Jonathan, your mother has divided loyalties, and the best thing you can do is be like a tree that's not brittle, but that is soft to the winds." And it was very poetic what he said, and very true, because it's all you can do. Is you can be a brittle tree in the wind and it breaks, or you can be soft. And I thought that was
like bamboo.
And I thought that was a wonderful metaphor that he shared with me. And it also fit with what Jesse, a friend of mine who I was quite interested in, but I don't think it was the Lord calling me into it, especially since my wife was still alive. But a very good platonic friend that stayed that way the whole time for about a year or two during the 16-17 period of time, roughly, or 15, 16. But she told me the same thing. She said to be soft in the way that you're responding to your family issues. It's sort of very, very Buddhist. She has a Buddhist orientation. And it was very helpful as well, I think. But the fact is, Divided Loyalties is a title for one of the books. Because what happens in families where there are divided loyalties is
That's an oxymoron. You can't have a divided loyalty. You have loyalty. Sorry.
You have people who dither and who are also double-minded, however, and that's what.
Yeah, but you don't divide your loyalty. You are loyal, and you have to figure out where your loyalty lies.
That's true. But within the heart of my mother is the torment of knowing that there's divided loyalties in her heart. In other words, she has to succumb to the bigger bully, or to the bully of the two. That is true. But the succumbing to that person is not a heart loyalty. It's fealty, it's vassalship, or it's a servitude, but it's not loyalty. Loyalty, the problem is in the depths of my mother's heart, is a sense of knowing that she could have done more for me. And I think that you can sympathize with that a little bit. Knowing that perhaps your parents might have been able to do a little more earlier on to obviate this. But on the other hand, they're not experts in law, your parents, nor is mine. And so
that's where I disagree with you. I think my parents knew exactly what they were doing. And I've said this. It's why, what did they want to achieve? And I mean, it's going on right now. If you want to solve the problem, you have to know the problem.
Well, this is a very good.
You have to expose the problem, and it's been 8 years of exposing corruption.
Okay, but look, we're talking about your parents right now, which is such a good thing, because, and my mother, and my father, that's a problem.
And please include Howard's mother there too. I think of her all the time.
Right, but you're saying that your parents, earlier on, before they'd obviously become dependent on others to help them, were in some way lending to what took place against you in some way, either directly, indirectly, purposefully, or accidentally? Is that what you're gathering from this situation?
Intentionally.
Unintentionally?
Intentionally.
Intentionally.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what is the best clue you have from either or both of your parents that there was an intentional aspect of, I don't know what to call it, sabotage? What do you want to call it? What would you call it?
Intentionally, the consequences of my parents' actions, it goes back to the way they raised me. It goes back to everything they did do. It goes back to, yes, they had wills and they had trusts. And yes, they moved to Piper Shores. And yes, they designated me with certain responsibilities. And yes, they were very good to Howard and me and our kids. And to say that they don't know what the law is, I mean, they knew what the laws
What I'm saying,
are,
what I'm asking.
They also knew that there were people out there breaking the laws,
Okay,
trespassing on the laws.
Okay, but
and
let's be specific.
In corrupt acts.
Okay, but let's be specific. Are you saying that your parents in some way helped set up Doug to end up ultimately having power to pull his shenanigan?
I think when I was in the hospital, I think because Douglas used to remind me, he says, well, we talked to Mom too, and we talked to Dad, and when Dad was sick, it was Douglas who was always, I mean, he was the one. Howard and I came up to open up the camps, and he calls us and said, Dad is in the hospital. I took him to the emergency room. There had been I had seen my father, the week before. I'd taken him to a doctor's appointment because at that point we were thinking that we wanted him to have a colonoscopy because everything else that he'd been diagnosed with had proved false. And Dad was fine. And then I get up to the lake, and Douglas calls and says he's in the emergency room. And I say, oh, so Howard and I drive down, and I go and I deal with my dad being in the emergency room and the hospital and all of that. And that means that Douglas, I mean, what prompted him to come up to the lake? I look back on it all, and it's just, I was just thinking it was my brother doing. He had concerns for Dad, which he should have, but it's just bizarre that happened, because there's my dad in a wheelchair in his bathrobe looking terrible, and then Douglas leaves and I have to deal with brain med once again. And then yes, then ever after that, Douglas was always kind of coming up, talking to Sonia to check into assisted living, and so I think it was planned. It's a typical Agatha Christie plot.
Okay, but when your father asked you, would you be willing to, are you sure that you're aware of what your job is, and will you pursue your job with conscientiously, etc.? Well, obviously, he was asking you if you would do your job of representing him and your mother and the will and everything.
Yes, because he also just wanted to make sure at that point, as I believed, or was led to believe, that this wouldn't be too much on Howard and me, because my grandmother lived with us, and I know, there were difficult times at times with that happening. My mother and my grandmother sometimes would, have issues with each other, and or when Mom and Dad were fighting, Grandma sometimes took Dad's side, and that just, when you have a parent living with you, there can be issues.
So when your father said, you understand, you're going to represent everything, are you able to do it? Obviously, he was concerned about you doing that correctly. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given you that charge.
Right. And as I said to him, we'd gone over the trust and the will, and it was like I was relieved, because obviously I wouldn't have to worry about the finances. I wouldn't have to worry about the insurance and the health care, because everything was taken. Dad and Mom had taken care of it to make sure that they could live independently. They could age independently.
So is there any evidence that your father allowed Douglas to supplant what your father had intended for you to do as the power of attorney and the representative for the estate? Was there any indication your father was being double-minded or was sending mixed messages? In other words, was this all Douglas Jr.'s action, or was your father helping Douglas ultimately, inadvertently or intentionally?
And my father was helping him through my mother.
In what way?
Remember, after he died, Mom and I came up and met with Tim O'Donnell. And we were dealing with my father's will and trust, which is, and I was being, Tim O'Donnell reaffirmed for me everything that Dad had told me when we were discussing, because he was sick. It was just, his last words to me were, "You'll take care of your mother." And I said, "Of course I will, Dad."
Okay, and so when your father died, you went up to Tim O'Donnell, and how does that part fit into the story?
Mom and I met with him, and we went over the will and trust documents, and I signed, it specifically said that if Mom was incapacitated, I was designated with the power of attorney, and if I was incapacitated, Douglas was designated with, he was the backup. So I signed that document, and we signed everything else that needed to be signed, the trust document, and Mom signed it, and we left a copy in Tim's safe. We went over the will, and then Douglas had to sign his power of attorney agreement. And then the other thing I had at that time was the residence agreement, where Mom and Dad had designated me as their personal representative at Piper Shores, which meant
I've got two questions, so let's not forget them. One of them is, that is proof that the will was not missing, wasn't it?
No, Tim had a copy in his safe.
So there was no dispute about a missing will.
No, Tim did not have a copy of the will. I had the will.
Okay, so
he had a copy of the trust in his safe.
Okay, but the will, your relatives asserted through their attorney, Veraldana attorney Jacqueline Ryder, that there is no will. It's been lost, right?
Yes.
And so here is proof that you had the will, because you went in and actually shared it with them a few years before, yes?
Yes.
And so when was the last time that the will was provably used for some other purpose? Was that the last time that you officially referred to it and used it, in which there was an actual proof that you had used the will? Had there been any other subsequent time when it was underwent scrutiny before an attorney that you might have a paper trail on? Could you put that down?
No. That was the last time, because I just kept the copy that had been sent to me in my files in Freeport.
Yeah. So to all intents and purposes, your daughter was party to the theft of the will, because that was the last status of your will, was at your house, and then it went on, and she said, "I took these papers."
Yes.
So that's a whole other separate thing. But getting back to your father's intentions, why do you think, if your father had spoke with you saying, "I'm reposing confidence in you, will you be able to do this?" Was he acting cagey about it? Was he acting nervous or double-minded about it, or was he just wanting to make sure that you gave your word that you would take care of your mother?
My father was acting like my father. I just think that there were no red flags. I think he was just assuring himself that I could do this. That's what I think.
That's the clear impression. You know your father better than anyone, so that's your impression.
That's what I think.
Do you think that he was experiencing internal compunctions for having given some leverage to Douglas, some possible hopes that he might have been officiating after all? In other words, what do you think, that he dithered a bit with Douglas, maybe possibly being more capable in his mind? And
no.
You don't think that ever happened?
What's really weird now is it's not even Douglas involved. It's Peter. Peter was designated with nothing.
Peter was designated with nothing?
Right.
Oh, yeah.
It was set up in the trust that...
I know, but Douglas.
The health proxy. But when it came to being the executor of the will and
I know. It was Douglas.
Manager of the trust, it was me, and then the backup was Douglas.
I know this. Okay, so I get the point. But the point is this. The real core problem is, did your parents in any way think that Douglas should ultimately have power to deal with all of these issues instead of you? Is there any sign in your experience at all, ever, when your parents either, dithered over things in their mind or questioned things, or
No.
what do you call it?
No, I
Second
was
guessed?
the oldest. No, it made perfect sense. I was the oldest.
So then what do you mean by the fact that your parents somehow could have done more? You've told me this several times. Let's get to the raw nerve here. What is it that they could have done more then that they didn't do to set you up for success? Maybe that's the way to phrase it. Was there something more that they could have done?
To set me up for success?
In other words, the indication that I have, the nagging burden on my heart, is that it seems to me that you've been disappointed in some way with respect to how your parents or one of your parents failed you in some way. Is that fair to say? Is there some element of, what do you call it, vacillation perhaps, or hesitation on the part of your mother or father that potentially hampered your ultimate purposes as the power of attorney for your mother? Could they have emboldened your siblings inadvertently or deliberately or at least Douglas, to feel that he should in fact ultimately feel justified in taking actions like he did? Was there anything to lend influence to that?
No, I think that they it was more directed my brothers or my siblings to take certain actions.
What do you mean? I don't know what you mean.
Well, it's not emboldened. My parents never emboldened their children to kind of go out and hurt one another.
Okay, so what do you mean, though? Can you rephrase that so I follow you?
I think it was, this is a family that we work together. As my mother said, we come together to solve problems when someone is in trouble. And we've gone from being that kind of a family, which we were, right up until my fainting spell. I mean, even where things got a little funny after Dad died in 2012. But we all four worked together, even if, we worked through our differences, though I don't really Douglas designed our house in Freeport.
No, I understand the compatibility.
So I spent a lot of time with him. But
the close friendship.
Was just, I keep going, what is your goal? Let's do the business plan. You write out a business plan, and how are you going to get there?
Did your father die before your fainting spell on Mother's Day?
He died in 2008.
Oh, okay.
My fainting spell was 4 years later.
That for some reason you confused me by saying that the same year it seemed. Okay, never mind. So the question really is ultimately, I feel that my brother Richard has sniffed around the money aspects of my family matter, the way that you're suggesting Douglas might have done a bit, or just as much perhaps. There's this very unfortunate aspect of doting on my mother that my brother Richard has done at critical moments, at junctures such as the restaurant thing happening with his son, where he allowed that to happen, but disallowed my wife and me from having taken out a co-signed mortgage that would have been my baby, not my mother's, which my brother Richard dampened and ultimately destroyed. And then he doesn't do anything to interfere with his son, however, with a restaurant that my mother sponsors, in which she loses a vast amount of money, actually. Until the very end, when it's clear that IRS is finally putting their claws into my mother and Jeremy and Elias, holding them accountable, I believe, as well. But certainly my mother ended up having to have a second mortgage on the house or something, or a second whatever that's called. Things have stabilized a bit, but there was a tenuous moment, a parlous moment for my mother, potentially, as I understand. I was never privy to the details because I'm the odd man out, of course. But what I do know is that my stepbrother has been very helpful to my mother to help resituate herself and put her finances somewhere. And things have looked better, a number of years back, I was told. But Richard, very calculatingly, has been around to, make sure that things work according to whatever he wishes. He was there to sell Jeremy's house items and house out from under him when my mother had to assume that burden of dealing with the fact that Jeremy wasn't making payments on his house or something at the time when around the time the restaurant thing failed, or there was a closing down of his house thing, which my mother helped him with after not helping me. So my brother Richard was not able to interfere with Jeremy originally getting his house as he had with me and my wife, but not that she was paying for it, but that she was helping to get things. Actually, she did invest a lot in Jeremy, as it turns out. Or I should say, offered of her, windfall or whatever you call it, largesse, is what my father would call it. So there was that, but Richard was ready right away to get rid of Jeremy's things without even consulting Jeremy, which was a very selfish thing that other members of the family recognized. You don't just sell things, you don't give things away or take them away without consulting a family member, right?
Right.
Regardless of what Jeremy was given in terms of largesse, that was terribly wrong, probably, in terms of a hemorrhage to my mother's finances, and the family's finances ultimately, of course, which is not what I was thinking about, but it is part of the picture. So the improvidence and recklessness that needed to be supervised, which my stepbrother, I'm sure, has been helpful to protect against in some respects. So there is this hovering over my mother by my brother Richard that is very suspicious, very controlling, very stifling. And my mother told me, with her friend Sherry standing next to her, the caregiver that I love, that I got to know, and along with Victoria now, she said, Jonathan, there's nothing that I can do or that we can do by ourselves. I think it was the we, but it was certainly I. There's nothing I can do by myself. It's going to be a bigger solution than myself, is what she very clearly articulated. And I knew what she meant without wanting her to spell it out, because you don't want your parent to have to spell it out. It's too painful. You know this very well.
Well, you're describing your situation is a lot more like Howard's situation. If you want to deal with family conflict, Howard's brother had the power of attorney, and Howard's sisters, when their father died, tried to claim that there was a different will, that certain things had been bequeathed to them.
I remember that.
Okay. And then the other upsetting thing that I knew they had done, they took away Holly's checkbook. And I remember this because Liza would go visit her grandmother, which she did when she was living in New York often. She went and visited her grandmother more than her own daughters would visit with their mother. And Holly was always, she said, I want to give you a check, Liza, so you can go out and buy something. And Liza, we had to tell her, just go along with it, but the checkbook, just don't cash it because it won't be cashed. And I just thought that was so horrible. I thought, don't do that to your mother. But
right, it is horrible. It's a horrible thing.
Howard's family did that. And it was like, that was never going to happen with my mother. And so, but then, yes, unfortunately, it did happen because I fainted, and that opened up the door for my brother to do, and my sister, my siblings, to do exactly what Howard's siblings had done. And Howard kind of isn't standing up for my mother like I stood up for his mother. And that hurts.
Well, yeah, that's the sad part, is that, and I direct this to Howard personally myself. You're not working through me to talk to Howard, so don't worry about any violation of restraining order here. But I'm choosing to share this and put it on public media for your children to see, and ultimately to share with their father. The tragic part is that here's Howard, and we've talked about this, who has experienced being on the wrong end of the stick with his own siblings, as you just referred to, and then he ends up condoning, if not colluding with, those who are party to, and perpetrators of the self-same sabotage. this is a tragedy, and it's to be much to be lamented, that selfishness has corroded the hearts of relatives, and it's a contagion, it's a disease, it's a plague, it's COVID-19 all over again, and it's worse than COVID-19 because it's a fatal plague for everyone that is bitten by this bug, this snake, and.
Well, it's a violation of an individual's right, inalienable right for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
That's right. And Jefferson, Brother Jean Toussaint sent me a Jefferson quote. I've got to read this early stuff. These founding fathers were brilliant. He said that government should be in the business of providing for the rights and the happiness. He adds the word happiness, interestingly enough, of the citizens, which otherwise would be working against us, is what I think the rest of the quote is. But it's a beautiful quote. And the purpose of government, he very clearly articulates, should be stipulated as providing for the rights and the happiness of citizens. Well, that surely isn't happening when Howard cannot appeal to some judge to say, wait a minute, my siblings have taken my mother's purse. If I were Judge Tucker, I would immediately say, Howard, Kathy, thank you for telling me that the checkbook has been taken from your mother. I want everyone that's related to that situation to come into this courtroom, and so we're going to make sure that we get the full list. Who needs to be in this courtroom, Howard and Kathy? And then you would tell me, okay, the siblings, etc. Anybody else? Well, yes, it's true. The eyewitnesses at the hospital, the nursing home, whatever, the residence facility, whatever. Okay, how many more? Anybody else? And then you scratch your head, you make sure you get everybody in there, all the witnesses. And in Judge Tucker's courtroom, the ideal is to sit down and make sure you don't leave until you get to the bottom of things. Isn't that lovely?
That's the way it should be, Jonathan.
That's the name of the book, Judge Tucker's Courtroom. What happens? It's a scenario of what would happen if it were done right. And then watch. One of the burdens of our justice system, as my father says, the wheels of justice grind or move slowly. He said to me when he referred to my country fraud, as he called it, out there in Hartford, Connecticut, this woman named Crystal Williams, a very slick operator. But here's the thing. Why do the wheels of justice move slowly? One of the reasons is the caseloads are too heavy for judges. Yes, no, or maybe? Yes, the courts are burdened with frivolous and malicious litigation.
Yes, that I agree with.
Okay, they would not be able to do that if Judge Tucker and other judges were men of conscience and women of conscience. Why? Because they wouldn't dare come in. It's like coming in. You ever heard of Judge Judy?
Vexatious litigation, malicious prosecution,
right.
And frivolous, yes.
An abusive process and all the rest. Here's the thing.
That's one of the terrible things about America, because in my travels, I've been very fortunate to travel because you can go climb cliffs and everything, and you can go right to the edge, and they don't have all the caution and barriers that we have in America, because we are a very litigious society. Something is wrong. Exactly. Everybody says, we can go to court.
Right, and here's the way to obviate a litigious society in one fell swoop. I love that old expression, whatever it means. But here's the thing. What is it that will be the curative for things? That's what I always ask. I always want to know what is the solution. And I'm very keen on not being satisfied with any half-baked answers. No, there is a classic answer for everything. I mean everything. And same for law. I know nothing about law, but now that I'm learning your story, I don't have to be a lawyer to figure out.
Well, it's called probable cause. You have to have grounds for a lawsuit, and a lot of people to just make them up.
Okay, so here's how you obviate.
Probable cause.
I understand that. So here's the point. Here's what you have to do. You deal with the probable cause issues in order to eliminate the frivolous ones. And once you establish the reputation for being a formidable judge that will always get to the bottom of things, do you think that Sally Sue Happy is going to go ahead and slap a lawsuit on Mr. Smith downtown with Judge Tucker in the courtroom? She would be terrified to do such a thing. So the deterrent to crime in terms of frivolous and malicious lawsuits, fraudulent lawsuits, it's all litigation, whatever, is to make sure that you get to the bottom of things in the courtroom and you bring all the witnesses in and you bring all the evidence in. Nobody's doing this. I'm talking about an ideal. I'm talking about what could be done. Someone could be stubborn enough and American enough to say, we are not going to stop this process till we get everything in here. And the judge has that prerogative to do that. Saying, you attorneys, you go back to the grindstone right now. I am not going to settle for a judgment on this frivolous material that you put before me. Otherwise, I'm going to hold you people in trouble. I'm going to have you in contempt of court as attorneys. If such a thing were not possible, I'll make sure it is. Because in my courtroom, you are not going to come in here with any presumptions or presuppositions or prejudices. You are coming in here as attorneys to represent to the best of your ability. And I'm talking to you, District Attorney. I'm talking to all of us here. Don't come in here and think that you're going to use loopholes and casuistry and statutes that have been superimposed over our simple Bill of Rights. This is a due process place here, and you will not interfere with the machinery of this court. And you send them back home, and they come back with whatever they need, and you drag it out until you finally get to the bottom of that story. And then what happens? Then you develop a Judge Judy reputation. Remember Judge Judy?
Oh, yes. No, I like Judge Judy.
I don't know how right she is, but I think she's right most of the time, isn't she?
Yeah, she's very common sense, and yes.
I think she knows how to drill down. Now, of course, I don't think she can be right all the time with the fact that everything happens with, the, what do you call it, fast food mentality toward justice. That's the problem with Judge Judy. You cannot do that. But on those cases where you can drill down to the core issues like she does, she's formidable, and she's always right. In the cases where you're looking at the invoice, you're looking at whether someone paid rent, etc., right?
Yes.
So there's no question when it comes to solid facts cases that Judge Judy deals with. There are other areas I think that are more gray area. I wouldn't want to have Judge Judy deal with that because it's not fair to Judge Judy or the people there. I'm guessing. I don't know enough about that, but maybe all of her cases are accurate. But that's what needs to happen. You need to have accurate justice every time. And that's what's presupposed in the biblical concept of justice. You sit down, you weigh the facts until you actually know what's going on. And that's why I asked you about your parents. Who in their right mind would even think about your parents and how they might have influenced things in any case, in any aspect in terms of Douglas and yourself? And if you're thinking that they really were not influential, great, but we need to know, was there someone there to help Douglas develop a sense of the divine right of kings, that he was going to be able to supplant you and take your power of attorney? But you drill down, you find out if there's any sense of justification. It's not right, but you want to know, what is Douglas's motivation? Why would he feel that he has a right to this? And the answer, of course, contemptuously, is that I talked to Dad and Mother too, and you're not the only one with an opinion here. We have ours, and we're getting messages from them. Isn't that the basic message from Douglas over the years?
The last 8 years, yes.
Okay, so that's the core problem. And in Judge Tucker's courtroom, that's what would be dealt with. And I would bring Douglas in, and I would bring Kathy Lowell, and I'd say, listen, we are not going to turn this into a massively expensive probate court issue. This is not Judge Aronson, and this isn't lawyer Jacqueline Ryder of Veraldana, the people who are expecting to get paid a salary to carry on. No. This is where you get right to the core issue, and that is Douglas, Kathy. Your parents wanted you to make sure that you were careful with the money regarding your family, that you would not be improvident with your money, and that this money would not be leaked through a probate court process. Is that correct, Kathy? Yes, Your Honor, that is correct, right?
Yes, it's my fiduciary responsibility, or being fiscally responsible. Yes.
Okay, and Douglas, you understand that by entering this into a dispute that will then impose a probate status upon this case that your parents did not want to ever go to probate. Do you understand that this is scandalous to your parents? Well, the fact is this. I have a dispute with my sister, and the probate law allows me to be in this courtroom to deal with disputes. As you know, that's the provision. I understand, Douglas, but we're going to drill down today. what's really going on here? Is the spirit, and I'm asking you, and you didn't answer me, is the spirit and the will and the letter of your parents' will and testament, last will and testament, and is the spirit and letter of their actual trusts as established in order to avoid probate, are they not clearly articulated, unambiguously articulated, as saying they want nothing to do with probate court? Well, Your Honor, that is what they're stating. And Douglas, do you not think it's impudent to dispute over technicalities of the fact that you're trying to prove that your sister was not moving fast enough on certain things, didn't get involved in certain things, when in fact we need to drill down and find out whether she even had access to your mother in order to help her to move, for example, to prove that she was fulfilling her obligations. One of your charges, is it not true, Douglas, is it not true that one of your charges is that your sister did not readily get involved in the moving of your mother from one place to another? Is that correct, Kathy Lowell? Is this the charge?
Yes.
And is that not a charge that Beryl Dana attorney Jacqueline Ryder felt was important enough to post as one of the bullet points against you, right?
Yes.
As proof that you are not capable of representing your mother and your father. And the will, the trust, and everything. Is that correct?
Yes. I might also add that I wasn't told that my mother had well, no. Yes, that's correct.
Well, you want to add something? Go ahead and do it. If the thought occurred to you, it's probably important. Take some time and chew on it and get it out.
Well, it was 2 weeks after my mother had died that I met with my brother Peter, and he came up to meet with me in Brunswick, and that's when he handed me a copy of the will and asked me to sign a waiver to have him appointed as personal rep. And I didn't do that, but there was 2 weeks there, and I was banned from Piper Shore, so how could I go down and help them move out Mom's apartment when I had been told that if I stepped foot on the property, I'd be arrested?
Now, wait a minute. This was 2 weeks after what? Clarify that for me.
2 weeks after my mother died. So there was a 2-week period there where I couldn't act. I couldn't do anything until my brother came up and gave me a copy of the will, which clearly stated that I was had been appointed personal rep, and I acted 2 days after that. That's when I did act. I went over to George Jobber's office because I thought he was the successor independent trustee, and I tried to meet with him, but he refused to meet with me, and I called him several times after that before going down to Princeton, and he never called me back.
Right,
so I acted.
And we've already covered that part of the picture, which is very important, as Douglas knows, the fact that these attorneys were unavailable who were supposed to represent your mother, and obviously you in the event that your mother's incapacitated. So this is very clear deception and duplicity on the part of these attorneys. That's very clear. We've talked about it. But the part that what needs to be clarified is that your siblings are contending that you didn't help your mother move your mother's items out of Piper Shores. Is that the contention? Is that the concern?
Yes.
So they're saying that you didn't fulfill your obligations when you were banned from Piper Shores by the same siblings who were claiming that you didn't show up to actually move her things to prove that you were capable of representing your family interests. Is that correct?
That's correct. And it was doubly painful because the same thing happened with Howard's mother after she died. And I had just remade her apartment, but I was not allowed to go down to New York and help move her things out of the apartment. Instead, basically, my daughter Liza helped, and Howard's siblings helped, and everything that I had spent months doing, getting new furniture and everything else, never saw it again. And the only thing I got from my mother-in-law, which Howard gave to me, he showed up one day and it gave me a Steuben bunch of grapes and 3 pins, 2 butterfly pins, and a panther and tiger. That's all I have from my mother-in-law.
Right. And so, Kathy, what in an ideal setting, your attorney and would obviously ask these questions, not the judge necessarily, but the judge would definitely move the court in that direction where your attorney would have to do his job. If he didn't, I would make sure that he would. I would say, look, your Kathy Lowell's attorney, is responsible to ask these questions, these pointed questions. And that's what a proper justice system would do, as you very well know. And so what we do is we conduct this court process in which we basically show what a true judge would do. And it's the truth teller chronicles of what should be compared to what actually exists. And so the judge continues. What does he say? He says, okay, attorney, Mr. Smith, carry on with your interrogatory with Kathy, with your direct examination. Okay, Kathy, what was the other contention that was brought against you as to why you couldn't properly represent your mother? What was the statement? What was the primary statement that they made to suggest that you were incapacitated incapable of representing your mother, and the will, the trust, and everything?
I failed to act. That was the statement. I failed to act.
And were you able to act? Were you given the proper information to know what to do by these attorneys, or did you have access refused to these attorneys?
I had access refused.
Yes, by the attorneys themselves, correct?
Yes, by the attorneys themselves.
Are you aware, Kathy, that when an attorney refuses to connect with a person who he's supposed to represent, that is a fundamental violation of the laws, the code of conduct for attorneys in the state of Maine and in this country?
Yes, I am.
Are you aware that this is a punishable offense?
Yes.
I submit for the court, for Judge Tucker, this document showing in the particulars as to where in the code of conduct they are violating the fundamental principle to represent their client. And a breach of trust, abuse of power, is directly implied by these attorneys who must be disbarred based on these particular criteria. And I have a full list here for you, Your Honor. I submit this for the record. You see what I'm saying, Kathy?
Yes, I do, and I am also aware that a court cannot intervene with the administration of a trust. A probate court has no business, has no authority to intervene with the administration of a trust.
Well, that your attorney presents to Judge Tucker, and Judge Tucker replies and says there's only one way that a trust can be entered into probate that has been declared to specifically required people to deal with things outside of probate, and that's if there's a family dispute. But the dispute has to be legitimate. It has to be based on legitimate claims of incapacity or incapability on the part of the trust of the representative of the estate. Correct, Kathy?
Well, yes, but this is a little more complicated than that, because this court has been interfering with the administration of my parents' trust without probable cause, Your Honor.
Exactly. And what your attorney goes on to do now is to say, Kathy, your parents made strict proviso in the trust that this is not to go to probate. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes.
All right, submit that part of the document. We do submit it right now for the court. Here's a copy for the others. Okay, now the other thing is your siblings, of course, are contending through Jacqueline Ryder, the attorney, that they can bring this into the arena of probate court because the contention is that you are not qualified. Based on...
No, the contention is that the trust has been amended. In 2014, you have to go back, Your Honor, when my brother was granted conservatorship over my mother, which she did not want. We have a document that says that gave my brother the authority to amend the trust. That's back in 2014, Your Honor. What is happening now?
Hold up. What document?
I have it here. It has been submitted as an exhibit by Jacqueline Ryder.
And what does the document state?
The document says it is the amended version of the trust, which removes me as, trustee. It also removes the waiver section of,
On what basis are they contending that they can do such?
that because my brother is now conservator of the trust of my mother, the protected person, that he has the authority. I can't remember the statute right now. It's not in front of me, but he has been granted the authority to amend the trust, and that's also George Jobber was involved with that because he removes him. He is removed as independent trustee. Yes, the other section that is removed is the trust requires that there will always be an independent trustee, and the amended version that is not required anymore.
Okay, and so what your attorney would say to you, or someone who's asking you questions, which would have to be an attorney, which in a perfect world would actually happen, but since it's not happening, we have to simulate it, which is tragic, but that's what we're doing. I'll simulate being an attorney again and just say, look, Kathy, what you're telling me, Kathy, and the judge needs to hear this, is your siblings pulled a shenanigan on the court, intend chicanery to be perpetrated in this courtroom, and Jacqueline Ryder is fully engaged in
complicit with their attorney.
Complicit with the attorney, but Jacqueline Ryder is fully and intentionally aware that she is committing usurpation of the court. That's the terminology here that applies. And what you're telling me is that these parties together have determined that once they arrange to get a conservatorship illegally, fraudulently, under a prior court, they could then
against my mother's wishes.
Then they could change, against your mother's wishes is the key point. They are able then to follow the proviso that once he's in the saddle, he can change the rules. Just as you had the power to change the rules because you were the one designated with that role, or would have been had they not interfered. Correct, Kathy Lowell?
I did not have the power to change the rules. I had the responsibility to administer the trust in accordance with my parents' wishes.
So you would not have been the conservator in the event that your brothers had never tried to usurp it?
No. The only thing I had been designated with was to be a successor trustee. That is very different, and that meant
okay. So what we're talking about,
I was there to advocate for my mother and what she wanted, and to make sure that her wishes were carried out.
So essentially, the conservatorship is a very potentially duplicitous tactic by which you can completely undermine the intentions of a will. Is that what you're telling me?
Yes. Well, on paper, it says the conservator has the same responsibilities as someone with a power of attorney. They are to carry out, the wishes of the person that they are conservator of. But as we all know, one of the primary elder abuse scams going on is dealing with this, is the conservatorship industry, because people have realized that they can go into these assisted living facilities or nursing homes and get someone to get an older person who is lonely and his family is far away, to sign something, a document that says that they can then take to court and get appointed conservator. And then just thanks to all of these electronic documents and everything else, you can basically legally rob somebody of their estate.
Okay.
And it's very hard for the kids who come in, and once they find out this is happening, to undo it because of what's going on in our court systems.
All right, so here's what your attorney would ask you now. He would say, let's see here. So you're telling me that the conservatorship is a racket for in many cases.
Yes.
Based on what you've seen in your own experience, you can only assume that it's happening obviously everywhere. So
Oh, and I know. I mean, I have
yeah,
a friend of mine from
but
Princeton Day School, David Stark, sent me. I mean, he allegedly was having the same issues going on with his mother, and he sent me. It's like a 20-page document about going over the details of what had happened. And I've heard this from other people I've met in Waterville. I mean, that's people who have been kind of cheated out of their inheritance because of a family member doing what your brother Robin is doing, or because of somebody...
Richard, not Robin.
Richard, or because of what my brother has done by going after conservatorship.
So here's what an attorney would ask you, your attorney if you had one. He would ask you this. He'd say, "So, are you telling the court that your brother, on the basis of fraudulently acquiring a conservatorship role in the presumed interest of protecting your mother against you, took that position, and from that position, because of the proviso of conservatorship allows it, has essentially destroyed your power of attorney and supplanted your role as representative for your mother"? Is that what you're saying for the court?
Yes.
So this power of conservatorship essentially trumps the power of attorney. Is that what we're saying for the court?
Well, yes, but it shouldn't. I mean, conservatorship, that's what it now does. But again, the idea of conservatorship was if somebody needs a conservator because they don't have anybody else to speak for them, then you can go to the court, and the court will appoint someone as conservator to make sure that that person is well taken care of and their wishes are carried out if there's nobody else available.
So if a power of attorney is not doing his job, another sibling can come in and get a conservatorship against the other one. Is that correct?
No, the court should never have allowed that to happen.
So there's no proviso for conservatorship to simply replace a power of attorney who's failing to do his job?
No. Power of attorney trumps everything, because the person who designated that the other person with power of attorney, that is their wishes, and a court cannot undo that.
Right.
Unless it is proven that that person is, stealing everything.
Exactly, violating their power of attorney role. Okay,
yes.
So getting back, your attorney then would simply revert back to would refer back, of course, to Attorney Andrews Campbell and Sarah, Sarah Churchill, and would refer back to anybody else, including Robbie Robinson. That's the third one. He would refer Randy Robinson. We would your attorney would refer back to those three parties to prove that your mother never intended for the power of attorney to be taken over by your brother, just because you drank metallic tasting water and were forcibly committed, against your wishes, in a form of enslavement and imprisonment at a medical facility, a mental health facility, to stigmatize you. Just because all of that happened did not justify in your mother's mind the intention to redirect the power of attorney now to a new member of the family. Your mother did not want that, and she specified that, and there's an affidavit proving that. Is that correct, Kathy?
Yes.
And that affidavit, how important is that affidavit, Kathy, for this courtroom, knowing that it's your mother's express will, and is it notarized?
It's a handwritten note.
It's a handwritten note. Was it notarized? Did Attorney Andrews Campbell have it notarized?
I don't know, because I don't know. My mother sent it on her own stationery, so it wasn't notarized.
Okay.
It was just her handwritten note to Judge Mazziotti saying that she didn't want this to happen because she treasured her independence.
She did not want what to happen for the court? Tell us.
Conservatorship.
To be given to who? Specify.
She just didn't want anybody to have conservatorship over her, but it was she said that her children were threatening her with taking conservatorship of her, and she did not want that to happen.
I remember reading that document at the probate court with you, and Don Juan Moses was with us in one of those instances. Yes, that particular document, and you have a copy of it. So the judge would then have to, the attorney would then submit that document to the judge, and it would be the cornerstone of your mother's case. Because this case is not about Douglas McClure and his capacity to do better than you or to replace you. It is strictly, this court process under Judge Tucker would be, what is your mother's intentions?
Yes.
Again, I repeat, this court has nothing to do with justifications for lateness on the part of one party as a reason why the other party is suddenly entitled to all the power of a power of attorney, the executor, the conservatorship, representative of the estate, whatever. All of these powers and concerns and contentions between you and your siblings are meaningless. What matters is, what is your mother's intention? And if you were slow to act, that is not a reason to take something from you. We need, in this court, to know whether you were slow to act to the extent of proving incapacity. And the answer is, you were incapacitated, but you were incapacitated not because of your own internal problems. You were incapacitated because other parties sabotaged you, abused you, and exploited you. And let's again specify for the court, Judge Tucker speaking, that you were incapacitated not by any fault or weakness or impairment, mental or otherwise, on your own part. You were incapacitated by the sabotage, the subterfuge, the intrigue of various relatives from two families, so that you could not act easily. And this in conjunction and in collusion with attorneys who were to represent your mother.
Yes.
And the sole purpose of this court is to find out if whether your mother's will was honored, whether your mother's intentions were honored. And this document is valid because we have a particular evidence on the part of Andrews Campbell. Kathy Lowell, we will be subpoenaing Andrews Campbell for our next session scheduled for this month on this date. Why? Because he is a witness to the veracity of this letter. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that's all that's needed. No notarization is needed. We have a witness. A witness to prove that that document is true. That's the true and accurate letter written by your mother. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to haul Judge Mazziotti into this courtroom.
I was just going to ask if that, because that should happen too, because why did he allow this to happen in his courtroom?
Yes, and Judge Mazziotti knew full well that he could have tested the veracity of that letter. And we're going to find out if Judge Mazziotti tested the veracity of your mother's letter, whether it was hers, written by her own hand. And if Judge Mazziotti cannot prove that it was an invalid document, then it will be proven a valid document in this courtroom. This is Judge Tucker's courtroom. This is a little different from what you normally see, Kathy. You're fortunate to be in a proper courtroom today, finally.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So you see, this is what a simple answer is. What does your mother want? Not what Douglas wants, not what Jacqueline Ryder wants, not what Peter wants, not what Annie wants, not what Kathy Lowell wants. No, 1,000 times no. All that we are concerned about on this holy Sabbath day, when I think of the spiritual dimension of your case, which is just as important as anything material and intellectual and secular and civil.
Well, then I would also add, what did both my mother and father want? Remember, they're two parents here involved who were working together. Yes.
Well,
so
there it is.
It's the two of them.
It's the two of them together. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. No doubt. And so, again, what is the simple solution here? You will know the truth, and the truth will make you free. The truth that allows freedom here is not for you to know the truth in your bosom only and still to be persecuted for eight years and even more now, counting. That's a freedom spiritually that you can have as you detox from the horrible, toxic approach of Howard and Douglas and their cast of friends. The privilege of knowing the truth and being free is not just for you. That's one kind of freedom. That story of the perfect example is the man persecuted for challenging the communists in Romania, tortured for Christ, Richard Wurmbrand.
Oh, right.
You saw that film.
Yes, I did.
And in Judge Tucker's courtroom, we're going to bring it up. It's not enough for you to be free in your own mind, knowing that you have done the right thing by your mother and that you've been tortured for a good reason because you stood up to do the right thing and you've been persecuted for righteousness' sake. That's not enough. You want your siblings to come to terms with what this is doing to the family. Isn't that correct, Kathy Lowell?
Well, yes, and I also want them to come to terms with, you don't do this this shouldn't happen to any human being. This is a violation of one's basic human rights.
Of course
you cannot go out there and stand up, which a lot of people will do these days. They will criticize other countries for, human rights violations. They have criticized our current president for not standing up against North Korea and China because, of all the egregious human rights violations that have been well documented. And but I sit there and say, how can you stand up against human rights violations when my experience these past 8 years is it is happening right here in, before your very eyes in the United States of America.
Exactly.
And
so
that's
right.
where you need to come to terms with that. Who are you?
That's right.
What kind of a person are you?
Okay, so we are looking at the human rights concerns of your mother and your father who are now dead, and now yours as you still are alive and have been sabotaged. And we are looking closely at the question of what do we do now? And the answer right now is to show that your mother's affidavit is the centerpiece, and it represents your father's will just as much as hers.
Uh-huh.
That they treasure their independence. That's why they kept it out of probate. This was dragged into probate under the false pretense that your brother Douglas had the power of attorney, and ultimately embroiled in the litigation, the malicious prosecution, and fraud upon the court that allowed your brother fraudulently to assume the role of conservator so that he could then change how things were to be conducted, so that he could then have complete control over what happens with the assets now that your parents are dead. So the right...
You also have to bring my mother's doctor into this, because he submitted an affidavit, or he wrote out what do you call it? Well, so there was an exhibit presented to the court from Dr. Brown saying that my mom had been his patient for so many years and that she was now in need of extra care because of her dementia. He basically claimed that she had dementia. And as Andrew Campbell points out in one of his affidavits, that happened, I guess there was a 15-minute interview. Dr. Brown showed up at my mother's apartment and interviewed her, and then came out with this diagnosis that she had dementia.
And was therefore incapacitated.
Well, and therefore, yes, it was required that she had additional care, and so basically supported my brother's petition for conservatorship.
Right. And again, based on her being incapacitated, correct?
Yeah.
And again, your friend Amy helped you to understand the contradiction and the perjury implied in what was going on, and the manipulation and fraud upon the court implied in the actions taken by your siblings, because it explained as simply as possible for the court how it is that your siblings were willing to use your mother when she had free will and her own self-determination when it was appropriate for them in their interest, but then they could disqualify her from having that free will when it was in their interest to do so. And it was inconsistent, and it was done in such a way that they first declared her capable of speaking her own mind.
Uh-huh. Well, that
No,
was in order
they
to
first,
have
excuse me.
my
Hold
power
up,
of attorney. Yeah.
hold up. First, they understood that she was capable, of course, all along. Then they declared her incapacitated at some point, and then subsequent to that, they asked her to sign off on something. Is that true or is that false?
That's true.
And to sign off on something as if she had self-determination privileges, right?
Yes.
So that is where we get to the core of this problem. In the Judge Tucker courtroom, what your friend Amy understood when she was your friend and your ally, and when she was a true friend of your mother, by the way, and a true friend of the whole family, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
Don't forget that. She was being a true friend to stand by you at that point. She said, this is completely and criminally wrong.
Mm-hmm.
They are claiming that she's incapacitated in order to accomplish whatever purposes they want at that point juncture. And then they need her to sign a document to empower themselves suddenly, having done imperfect work. They suddenly realized, oh, we're in trouble. We're trying to get empowered to take over this, but we didn't get the permission from Mother. Is that correct?
Yes.
So we need to get permission from Mother, even though we've already declared her incapacitated. So she's capable suddenly, by a mysterious waving of a wand, to empower us with Douglas with the conservatorship role. Is that correct?
Yes. And the other reason that they applied for conservatorship, and I just want this on the record because this really hurt, is that they said my mother needed to be protected from me.
Okay, let's drill down on that one today, and then we'll finish up the process. Don't forget, we're looking at the spiritual elements of family healing here in this courtroom. In other words, we're not here just to litigate and have a blood sport. This is not who can inflict the greater wound on the other and leave you both parties bleeding, leaving a trail of blood from this courtroom out to the streets, to their homes. That doesn't happen in the Tucker courtroom. Are you happy about that, Kathy?
Yes, thank you.
Douglas McClure, are you happy about that? Your Honor, I don't have to answer that question. Well, I can see why you don't want to, Douglas. Peter, are you happy about that? Peter McClure. Well, you got a point there. This is a blood sport. Annie, get your gun, or Annie, put your gun down. Which is it?
I don't know. It's been a long time since I've had an honest conversation with my sister.
Howard Lowell, are you happy that we don't have a blood sport in this courtroom, and that we're not here to pick flaws at each other to the point where we simply destroy each other? That we're here to bring healing to families? Are you happy to know that someone's on the payroll of the United States government who, as a judge, is here to make sure that you leave this courtroom knowing that you've come away from a prayer meeting? That you come away from an hallelujah healing? Are you ready for that, Howard? Well, listen. When my wife suggested a Jesuit priest preside over me and he began to pontificate, I didn't like it then, and I don't like it now, Judge Tucker. You are not a priest, and you are not a pastor. Howard, that may well be the case, but I am a judge who understands the Constitution. And if your siblings are going to ride on your coattails, knowing the sabotage that you perpetrated, to undermine your wife, and to come into Judge Aronson's courtroom, and we have all that transcript for you, saying all these properties are mine, and we have the documents otherwise right here, stacked up, that you've just seen copies of, showing that these properties are jointly owned by the two of you, and you declared her mentally ill, and you went along with it, and you're content. Are you telling me, Howard Lowell, that you're content to leave things the way they are?
Well, he's also now, for the second time, declared that he needs to be protected from me because I'm a danger to him.
Yes, we're going to deal with that as well, Kathy. We've got a lot of detritus to deal with here, and we will deal with that as well. All of this, Howard, is not something negotiable. You've come upon hard times, Howard. But this is for your good. I am a judge of conscience. And I believe there's forgiveness for mischief. You convinced your cast of scores of people, if not hundreds of people, that your cause was just. You used, in order to defraud your wife, to extort the marital assets in a state that allows for equal distribution upon divorce, and you did it through not a divorce but a separation agreement in violation of the law. That alone is a charge sufficient to defrock Judge Joe Fields, a friend of yours, a conflict of interest friend of yours who refused to back out of that court setting. He refused to recuse himself, and you know this. And we have proof that you are friends, that Kathy has supplied, that you have been in touch with each other, and that you knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, do you have that proof?
Yes.
What proof do you have for the court?
I have an email between Diane Ducini, my lawyer at the time, and me, where she was asking me if that there were two judges who were going to be that we could have at the hearing, Judge Kennedy or Judge Fields, and was there any conflict there? And I emailed her back and said yes, because Howard and I know Judge Joe Fields. We socialized with him, so
all right.
Judge Kennedy it was.
Submit that for the record. And the other thing is, when you brought that to the attention of Attorney Diane Ducini, who will have to be subpoenaed, of course, again, we're thorough here. We do not miss anything. You understand that, Kathy?
Okay.
We are subpoenaing Diane Ducini. I know this has never been done in America before. Does that matter? Does it matter that we are doing unprecedented things here because it's important that we do the right thing? No, it doesn't matter that the things haven't happened before as an excuse for why they must remain the same. That's why we are in a mess today in America. Because nobody wants to be a Joan of Arc and deal with these issues. And I'm glad that you're willing to be a Joan of Arc. I'm a Joan of Arc as a judge. And, we are going to help bring about change in America. So here's what we do.
You could be a Don Quixote.
Okay, we can be whatever you want. But we're not going to be tilting at windmills, right? But here's the thing. I don't know enough about that. So here we go. But let me
it's similar. He's the male version of a Joan of Arc.
Okay,
there are all sorts of...
We'll deal with that later, Kathy. But getting back to our context here. We're in the courtroom. Let's be serious. We're in the courtroom. But here's the thing. The judge then goes on. Judge Tucker says, listen, Kathy, I need to know something then. Any reasonable person who has any heart at all of compassion to follow through would ask this question. When Diane Ducini was apprised that was a conflict of interest attorney, what happened next? Did she follow properly and make sure that judge was not used?
Yes.
But you told me that Judge Joe Fields was ultimately used in spite of that, the communication with her.
Well, but when we had that hearing, the one court hearing that Howard and I had in Bath, it was Judge Kennedy who presided, not Judge Joe Fields. Judge Joe Fields, I never physically, met with Judge Joe Fields in the courtroom. But Judge Joe Fields is the person who signed all the agreements and documents. And I have a docket record that shows that there were several phone conversations between Howard and Judge Joe Fields.
Yes, all of that is to be submitted for the court, and now your attorney is asking you. And those rulings by Judge Joe Fields were to have all your marital assets usurped by Howard Lowell, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Judge Joe Fields' signature is on the judicial separation, the abstract of judicial separation, where it claims that all the marital assets have been divided, and there are which when the divorce decree, which was a different judge who did that, but Howard's lawyer said that the marital assets have already been divided and there's no marital assets to be divided.
One of the things we will be dealing with Howard Lowell in this courtroom, and Kathy, is the distinction between those two settings in which the marital assets were divided unfairly and by means of extortion, ultimately by way of extortion. We will deal with those two cases separately or together, but we'll deal with the separate details as to how that breaks down, and we're going to go right down the middle, to the last details, so that we get to the bottom of that. Howard, do you understand this? Yes, I do. So here's the thing: we don't have a choice here. We do not want frivolous and malicious litigation to take place in the state of Maine again. And we are setting the tone for other judges to do the same in the state of Maine, if they choose. And if they don't, ultimately we will have cases filed against those judges, so that we will remove those judges and replace them. Kathy, are you happy about that?
Yes.
That's how you bring about change, Kathy. You as citizens are critical to bring about change at your level, and we as judges are to do so at our level. It takes only one good judge to do it. A few good men, and that's all, and women. So here's what we do. Diane Ducini understood it was a conflict of interest, so she honored you by putting Kennedy in on that particular date. But did Diane Ducini have anything to do with the other occasion when the court sat and, however it did, through digital format, through Howard, sending off a little note by email, however it was done, and that's another thing we're going to examine in this courtroom, how that was conducted. Was it a digital trial with a little squiggly somewhere added somewhere to some paper? This is the kind of thing we will nail down, but not now. But what we are asking is, did Diane Ducini know that Judge Joe Fields officiated over the distribution of marital assets?
No, because I think she had withdrawn herself from the case at that point.
We need to go back and get that detail down to the minutia. You understand why that's important, Kathy? If an attorney knows that something is wrong and doesn't say something, that attorney is now violating the code of ethics for attorneys. Yes, no, or maybe?
No, yes.
That's why we bring her in. She has to answer for this. Do you have... you cannot remember then when you were proposing to Diane Ducini that you could not use Judge Joe Fields because it would be conflict of interest. You don't know whether by that time you would...
No, because I had gone on... The last time I went into her office, I worked with her assistant, Diane, also named Diane, because they wanted to know, we had to go over all of my financials. So, my credit cards and all of that. And then I got a bill soon after that because I'd gone through my retainer and saying that I owed them $3,400. And that's when I just decided this was going nowhere, and I wasn't going to pay another $3,400 since she had made it very clear to me that there was going to be no reconciliation, and Howard was going to proceed with the judicial separation and then a divorce. And so then when I got that docket record, it shows that because I was not communicating with her, that she asked the judge if she could be withdrawn from the case. And that's when, and it was after that we dealt with the judicial separation abstract was issued. I received a copy in the mail, and I think I received it from Howard's lawyer, Elizabeth Stout, who basically was also the one who drafted the judicial decree of divorce for the judge, which was accepted. And she was saying, the language was, the division of marital assets has already happened and there are no marital assets to be divided. So Diane Ducini was off the case before that happened.
Yes. We will have her come into court for one simple purpose. Diane Ducini will verify what you have in email form right here. A statement that you made to her that Judge Joe Fields would not qualify because he must recuse himself. He would have to recuse himself because he's a friend of the families. Now we bring in Liz Stout. Of course, we have to subpoena her. Why would we have to subpoena Liz Stout, Kathy?
Because she was Howard's lawyer.
That's not enough reason. Tell me the reason.
Also, a lawyer is responsible to tell the truth, and they have to. They also have to honor their code of ethics. But there are all sorts of things that Liz Stout did. For her to attest that the division of the marital assets have been equitably divided is a lie. And for her to, she even at one point put in one of her affidavits that I was mentally ill. You can't do that as a lawyer. But there are also, those are just two things that come to mind right now. But
Listen,
I could.
What we have to do now is compare the statement by Liz Stout, your ex-husband's or husband's attorney, saying that you're mentally ill. Compare that with the documentation you have being cleared from Spring Harbor and not having some kind of a diagnosis. Is that correct? Did you ever verify what diagnosis they provided for you? Or did they not provide a diagnosis whatsoever?
But there wasn't a diagnosis. There's no diagnosis of a mental illness in my records.
Did you have the complete records to verify that?
Yes, I do. I got them from Jessica Moninsky from
All right.
the Disability Rights Center.
Jessica Moninsky will be subpoenaed in this courtroom. All the documents will be subpoenaed.
Good luck finding her, because the last time I tried to get in touch with the Disability Rights Center, I was told that she was no longer there.
That's a problem that exists in our justice system. People disappear for various reasons, and surprise, 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 right? That hello. We know exactly why people suddenly get retired. They're suddenly on paid administrative paid leave, all types of shenanigans. Well, that doesn't happen in the Judge Tucker courtroom. There are no excuses, Kathy Lowell. You understand me? Everybody shows up here. This is like the apocalypse, the judgment, the great white throne. This is where you stand naked before the great God. So let's get this right here. This is Howard. You didn't pick the right venue this time, did you? You know why, Howard Lowell? Because you no longer can choose which judge you're working with. And Douglas, this ain't no picnic for you. Tim O'Donnell, you know anybody like him? And his cohort in crime, George Jobber, that famous name in Maine. I'm not afraid of going against my peers in the judicial circuit here. Are you crazy? They've gotten to know me quite well. This is Judge Tucker's courtroom here. We don't play around here. Tim O'Donnell will be coming in to prove that he refused to connect with Kathy Lowell at the time that you took the power of attorney from your sister. Douglas, are you aware of this? Are you aware of the seriousness of Tim O'Donnell coming in here and answering for these charges? Yes, Your Honor. And it will be based on the level of compunctions that you, Howard Lowell, and you, Douglas McClure, have. That will be the determination of what happens for you in the upshot of this trial. So bear in mind that how you handle the truth, and nothing but the truth here, and how you carry yourselves will determine what kind of justice is meted out here in terms of punishment. Because we are not going to allow people to thumb their noses at justice. And worse than that, to exploit helpless, vulnerable people who are shattered because their families have been divided and they can't even, as this grandmother, see their own grandchildren without the pangs and the persecution of knowing that they are under the watchful eye of suspicious relatives, all who believe these lies that you've concocted, Howard and Douglas. So today, you go home, Douglas, and you go home, Howard, and you read To Kill a Mockingbird. That's your homework. Your Honor, I don't need to be preached at and told what to do in my own private time. Howard Lowell, you will be held in contempt of court if you step too far.
That's ironic.
Why is that ironic, Kathy?
Well, because I have been told what to do in my private time for the last 8 years. I haven't had any private time.
Yes, Big Brother is watching. Is that what you're saying, Kathy?
Yep.
Yeah, well, this is a different kind of Big Brother. I'm a Big Brother that's going to make things happen, Howard and Douglas. You are dismissed today. Bang, bang, bang. All rise. Kathy, we've got this recorded. It's going to press.
Okay, Jonathan. Thank you.
To Kill a Mockingbird, a sequel.
Well,
remember the line.
This time we'll get it right.
I didn't read the whole book, I'm remiss, but I did read the part that's probably the core of it all. It's that part I keep telling you about. Where, what's the lawyer's name? Help me out.
Atticus Finch.
Atticus Finch. Atticus Finch looks at his client and says, listen, in the world, it's not fair. You cannot be sure of anything, and you can be injured in many ways in the world and abused, persecuted, destroyed. But there's one place you can go. I don't remember the wording, but this is what I remember. There's one place where you can go where you can be sure that everything's going to be done right, and that's the courtroom.
Right, because it's balance, the balance of power. Remember Lady Justice, she has those scales. But the scales have not been balanced in my case. They've been skewed.
Yes, they have been skewed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Kathy, look, we're going to put this production out. We're going to get into documentaries. We're going to get into the media. We're going to get into email lists, marketing. We're going to find alternative venues to Facebook and Twitter. One of them being, remind me of what it is, Parlay. Parlay. Have you heard of Parlay yet?
Yes, I saw it. Someone posted that on Facebook the other day.
Well, I did. I was one of them.
Okay, maybe it was you. But, that's also interesting, too, because I can't believe I'm going to say that, but as you know, my children have friends who work for Facebook and Google. My son worked for Google. And one would like to think that these kids want to be, like I was when I was younger. They had dreams, wanted to make the world a better place. And they have created, I think in the beginning, the idea behind Google and Facebook, it was great. But look how quickly it has become kind of a monster.
Noble cause corruption.
Yes, but there you have it. So you would I want those who work for Facebook and Google to succeed, but I also, if somebody wants to start another communication platform like Parlay, they should be able to succeed too. You can't it's like big pharma. You can't have these giants coming in and trampling the little guys. You got to let the Davids sort of be able to.
I'm suspecting that Parlay is going to work quite well if all the Trumpers get off, jump ship. I think that it'll develop on its own, so that we'll have another a big entity that will actually operate in integrity. That's the beauty of it. But yes, regardless, remember the Pilgrims, and I'm related to the Pilgrims, and I don't know if some of your family people are, but
no, definitely a Mayflower person.
Yep, and I am on both sides. I never verified it, but certainly one side, and related to Elder Brewster. So that's why I'm the way I am. See, Elder Brewster of the Mayflower. Okay, so here's the thing. When they came on the Mayflower, they did not need to worry about how many people were in their organization. They were only interested in quality commitment. They wanted to be in a place where their families would be free to worship God without the Church of England telling them what to do.
Right.
Which was a Bud Light version of the Catholic Church. They didn't believe that religion should be dictated. That was the essence of the Pilgrim Charter, and they had an agreement before they got off the vessel and landed, put their feet on terra firma. They had an agreement that they would set up in their compact this marvelous agreement that they would serve God and serve one another. It was a beautiful thing, and it got corrupted. But it was a beautiful thing at that time when Elder Robinson offered his farewell sermon and prayers in Holland, where he remained, but asking them to be blessed and to be led whichever way the Lord leads. Most precious history that I need to go back and read. And they did not need a large organization to do what they're doing. So if Parlay is doing the right thing, and it's not censoring people because they're contributing information with false fact checks, then Parlay is the only thing that we can conscientiously do. And we have to boycott Facebook if they practice censorship. It's the principle of it. It's the principle of it. All right, Kathy. Same thing with the Judge Tucker courtroom. It's an exception to the rule. Yes, it's only virtual right now. Yes, it's only notional right now. But it will go to the hearts of the people. And as they hear your story, and they get down to the core issues, and all of these documents are ultimately brought before a real court of law, the book will be so entertaining and riveting and a bestseller that the courtroom, when it finally has to face all your documents, will be forced to do so because of the power of the press, because of the publicity, because of the worldwide popularity of your case. See? That's how we do it. So we become masters of new areas of our lives that we've never done before, things that we've never done before. I'm going to get into marketing. I'm going to get into self-promotion, something I find detestable. I find it odious. I find it somehow particularly odious as a Christian to do so on a moral principle basis. But I already found it odious enough as an artist. I didn't want to have to push my own artwork. I felt that was not good. And my father used to test me on that, saying, Jonathan, you know,
you have to live.
I could have been an artist. I could have been a very accomplished artist. God gave me that gift. But God called me into writing and chronicling because there's a deeper spiritual gift that I want to put my primary focus on for my life work. I want to get into art, and I can't wait to do it. But I'm not going to let that interfere with this deeper work of justice. It's deeper in my heart than my artwork. Okay?
Well, Jonathan, I'm going to put my preservation hat on for a minute and bring up my good friend Louise Stilpen. When we were going through moving the brick house, she would always say to me, I can give that brick house a new home and I can rehab it, but I can't afford to move it. And therefore, it has to be economically viable. And one of the things that is wonderful, that I loved about the world of preservation, is a wonderful man named Donald Ripkema, who, he's given some incredible speeches. But that preservation only succeeds if it's economically viable. President Trump, there was a press briefing last week because another agreement has been signed between Serbia and Kosovo at the White House, which I don't know if you heard anything about it.
Not yet, because I've been busy with some other things.
You had these three men come out who were part of the signing, and this one guy got up there, and he said, this has been going on for 21 years. And he said, for those of us who have been involved for the last 21 years, this is historic, and this is important, and it is just unconscionable to me that you are not reporting this. And then he went on to say, I think it's because you're too young. You don't understand, what's going on. And then he went on and he said, the only person who has made this happen is someone like Donald Trump, because he said for the last 21 years we have followed the same playbook. It's all been politics. And Trump came in and said, why don't we try something different? Let's do the economic approach, because that's what matters in these countries. People want to have a roof over their heads and they want to have food.
I'm going to be looking that up. I'm looking that up. I'm very eager. That's very exciting.
Okay. But and I was saying this to Kevin. I said, that's me. I've learned my experience with, preservation is it has to be economically viable. And it was how wonderful for me to work with this wonderful woman who had founded a school who just made that very clear. So every time we had a historic commission meeting and we were talking about preserving something, I said, well, there's a fourth criteria to the three criteria that we have to meet to determine its historic significance. It has to be economically viable. That's the only way we're going to preserve what matters.
Okay. And so let's get to the point. The point here, the application of that to our discussion now, let's get back to the discussion, is that it has to be economically viable to bring about justice. So you have to have a bestseller book. You have to have proceeds. You've got to have money. The Bible says money answers all things. It is the currency of transactions and change and movement and progress and production. It is money.
Yes.
You've got to have money to make money.
And what did the Indians use? They used shells, and it's that. Yes, it's your wampum. It's whatever. You have to have money to eat.
Okay, so we produce a bestseller. We have other venues as well, though. We've got to put other irons in the fire and find out how to become movers and shakers in new areas that we haven't tried before, as well as, of course, using the talents we have, which, of course, may be reclassed, obviously reconfigured. I forget the word I'm using, but if you have a skill, it can be obviously oriented toward anything else where that skill is needed. So all of this, your past experience is highly and eminently useful, and we'll figure out how to do that. But don't forget the principle here. You are up against a Goliath of iniquity, as is Trump, and as are all the people who are now investigating the corruption of the voter fraud. And so, Father in heaven, we lift up right now the fact that this country is in the throes of either a determination for a socialist, ultimately communist society, dictated to and directed by centralized government, or a society that believes in the freedom of citizens from onerous, oppressive, high-handed government power. It's the obvious choice. Everyone knows it, and anyone who knows American history knows. To the shame of all those blue states lining the coasts of our country, California and Maine, and although the inland Maine is all red, the coast is all blue and sophisticated, voting for progress because they have forgotten their history. They're too young. They've forgotten.
Well,
And they're supposed to be educated.
My friend Mary would say they're all flatlanders. They're not native Mainers.
They might
The lobstermen and stuff can't afford to live on the coast of Maine anymore.
Yes, and flatliners might be another term we should use for them, because after all, when you look at someone, whether they have a heart attack and whether their ticker's working, if you see a flat line, it means they're dead.
Right.
So I think we should properly call them flatliners. What do you think?
That makes sense to me.
And you just coined a new term inadvertently. A Freudian slip there. But the fact is, Kathy, look, we're in prayer. I forgot. Father, we are simply asking that at this point, that we see a tipping point, which is that lovely expression we've talked about before. I feel it in the air. I really do, Father. I feel our country right now at the most critical point that it has ever been since the American Revolution, without question. Because we have half of our society, give or take, whatever, roughly half of the society, apparently, saying that we should move toward socialism. And then we have the other half recognizing the importance of developing the economy and the freedoms of individuals, and dealing with corruption, and searching it out, and holding the FBI and high officials in state and in government and in D.C. accountable. We have one side that's willing to hold government accountable to the people, by the people, and for the people, and we have another side that is a flunky for 47 years, simply putting his time in a sinecure job. And Father, you know who they are. And Father, I am simply asking that your Holy Spirit help those people who need to be informants at this time to define the details for the Supreme Court of this country, where and how fraud was conducted, as high up the ladder as necessary, especially high up the ladder, to show how machines were rigged, how particular things happened with machines to accomplish perverted and corrupt ends. Father, I pray that you prick the hearts of those honest souls who had been caught up in a dishonest enterprise, and that you reach their heart, and that you allow them to understand they are going to be exonerated by the president, if what I heard is true, if they're willing to cough up the truth. And for $1 million, not of bribery, but of reward. Of reward to do the right thing and to repent. Forever to be deplorably one of the deplorables for having been part of the democratic socialist machine by doing what Marx and Lenin arranged in 1917 history that Kathy Lowell must know, in the Bolshevik Revolution, to actually falsely count the votes. Yes, Father, it's the equivalent of that dastardly deed of destroying the civilization and culture and freedom of Russia, right in our own country. And we have a coup d'etat essentially happening if we don't deal with this electoral fraud. And Father, in the name of Jesus, I am simply lifting up the need for these leaders, these influential people who are counting votes or supervising the counting of votes especially, to have that opportunity to come forward so that the Supreme Court will have an easy case. Because if there are not willing witnesses, we cannot have the justice. So I pray today for those people who are dishonest to become honest. Some of them, even if it's the reward of $1,000 for the infamy for the rest of their lives, to know that they were part of the crime perpetrated against our citizenry. Father, I ask in the name of Jesus that this ingenious project of Trump's to pay each person high up $1 million, that they will be warmed to the cockles of their heart will be warmed to know that they can at least begin a new life from this point on, knowing that forever they will have to bear that horrible scorn of society, of a new society that allows people to understand that never again will we, until the Antichrist power rears its ugly head ultimately, which I believe does happen, but never again for the foreseeable immediate future at least, do we have any corruption of the electoral process. That it is created it's conducted in a transparent fashion with the efficiency that Google monitors its own transactions. In Jesus' name I thank you. Amen.
Amen.
Well, there it is, Kathy. We pray for that somebody come up and fess up. We've got a lot of them already lining up. We just need some big ones.
Yes, especially because, as I've said many times, and I mean this, for me, healing begins with telling the truth.
There you go. And when I use that funny little term, the truth tellers, I just slapped that on a group that I had that you happen to be a member of. I wasn't paying attention who's there. I just said, let me call this one truth tellers. So make sure I remind them all of their best natures, their better natures. And then you said later on, that's a great title for a book series. And I have to say that quite inadvertently, and funnily enough, it works.
Good.
I think the shoe fits. I think the truth tellers is a very, very winsome, alluring, and engaging title.
Well, it goes back to George Washington. I cannot tell a lie, right?
I think
it's the story.
I think you know what I love.
Tree,
yes.
Chop down the cherry tree. Yeah.
Yes, you know what I love about the truth tellers.
What?
I got to thinking about why you got jumped on it and got excited. I'm excited because it means that it doesn't matter what your past is. It doesn't matter what stigmas people have thrown on you. Real, partly true or fully true, in terms of any type of statements, a witness against a person. Truth tellers tell the truth about whatever they've done wrong in the past. And they tell the truth about everything that they're doing right now. That's the beauty of the truth tellers. It doesn't matter who you are. You can be Mary Magdalene or Paul the Apostle. You're a truth teller. And that's what the gospel taught as well. Getting back on the Sabbath day to a mini sermon, Mary Magdalene was the heroine of the New Testament. She was the first one to see the resurrection of Christ.
Right.
Not the beloved John, whose head rests on the bosom of Christ at the Last Supper. Not Peter, the one upon whom the Catholic Church claims, although falsely, I might suggest, that upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. You are Peter, and meaning a little stone, and on this rock, meaning the big stone, which is, by the way, himself, I will build my church. But regardless of that, the Protestant Catholic major conflict. Not John, the beloved, who said God is love, and he who dwells in love dwells in God, and God in him. The most powerful poetry of the New Testament, of all writings in all history, in my mind. Neither of them received the news that Christ had risen from the dead first. It was Mary Magdalene, the one out of whom Jesus cast 7 devils. It was a woman who needed to start all over. The disciples did too, because they were fighting at the Last Supper about who would be the greatest, right up until the Last Supper. They had a contention as to who was going to be the greatest in the kingdom. They missed the boat. Mary Magdalene already had the message. She takes a perfume that's worth an entire year's earnings for a laboring man. She buys kingly burial perfume, knowing that her master is going to die and believing the story. The disciples trying to fight against it because they're not understanding sacrificial love. There is a need for martyrs, and that's why you and I are suffering. Dying by inches, as I think Ellen White called it. And it's more painful than dying efficiently, as you very well know. But nevertheless, suffering for a purpose. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, as I keep telling you. But Mary Magdalene shows up at the tomb, the empty tomb, where Peter and John verified that he wasn't there, and they saw the folded cloths. The part that was the part that covered his body, and then the part apparently that covered his head, folded separately, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that part. But it was very neatly folded, which is Jesus' signature. He was neat. And they saw and they took notice, it says in the Bible. One of the books, New Testament. Luke, Matthew cover it. John covers it. Not Mark, I think. But here's the part. Mary Magdalene shows up after them. The angel could have told these 2 disciples, one outrunning the other, Peter. John outrunning Peter to get there to see the empty tomb. Mary shows up with spices, with some other ladies, if I'm not mistaken. The account is unclear exactly, but she's told at least, and I think the woman with her, they've got perfumes, again, to properly do what they couldn't do because the Sabbath had fallen the day before. They were observers of the seventh-day Sabbath. Hello, that's a curious detail that Adventists like to highlight for obvious reasons. Friday, when the sun came down, the Sabbath began, and so that was their preparation day. So they had prepared the spices, and they were ready on Sunday morning, as we call it today, Sunday, first day of the week, to come and anoint the body of Jesus. And of course, he's not there. And Mary, through her tears, sees the man she thinks is the gardener, saying, "If you've borne away the body of Christ, tell us where it is that we might take care of it," or something to that effect. And she realizes it's not the gardener, it's Jesus. And she says, she doesn't realize it yet until she hears her name. He says, "Mary." And of course, she knows immediately who it is. It's the same man, her true lover, the one who delivered her from all of her past. And she says Rabboni in the Hebrew, which means master. And he says, "Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended." Remember that?
No, I don't remember that exactly, but
well, those are the words.
Story, I know. Yes, okay.
"Touch me not, for I have not yet ascended, but go and tell my disciples that I go to my God and your God, and tell them that I will meet with you in Galilee, as I have told them." And that is exactly what he had told them, that he, after his resurrection, after his death and resurrection, would meet them in Galilee. And so, of course, she goes and tells them, and I don't think they believe her at first. Why am I forgetting that? But they finally do, of course, because they meet him in Galilee. They get it together. But the fact is, and he shows up and he meets the men on the road to Emmaus as well to confirm this. And they end up at a group meeting telling the story. And then Jesus shows up, and the entire convention sees Jesus resurrected with his hands pierced and his feet pierced forever. The dazzling symbols of his amazing love for us, that he was willing to give everything up that we might have everything again. Paradise restored. But Mary is one of the truth tellers, and Jesus saw fit to tell her first, not the disciples, but Mary, because her heart was in the right place. The disciples yet had a very important lesson to learn. Put away your pride and your contention, Howard Lowell and Douglas McClure, because Mary has devotion, and you, Kathy, have devotion. You love the family, and you care more about the family and getting along than you do about litigious concerns and being right and having an opinion. Even though you're highly opinionated, deep within the core of your being is a heart of love. And that's why you are a truth teller, and they are not yet fully engaged in this process. And so Mary, she recognizes that he's alive, and the church is transformed because they see that he is now at the right hand of the Father, and that he will return. And so for me, the beauty of it is that truth tellers is a very powerful concept. I really think that it will be a movement. I really do, Kathy, because I think people love that. I think that in our heart of hearts, we all want to be that way. I think Howard wants to be that way, and Douglas. I do. But they're going to have to come out of something that the disciples had to come out from. You wouldn't know this, so I'll just inform you, and you can read it for yourself. On the day of Pentecost, they were all of one accord in one place, and there fell upon them, I don't have my Bible, but I remember some of this, they fell upon them flames of fire on each head.
Oh, right, the tongues of fire.
And they heard a mighty rushing wind, if I remember the words correctly, shaking the whole place before the fires appear. What had happened? What had happened? The disciples had experienced what Mary Magdalene experienced before them. God is no respecter of persons. He doesn't pick men over women. He picks the person of character over the person that doesn't have the character. He doesn't pick white over black or black over white. A man will not be judged by the color of his skin, but by the content of his or her character. And so that's the beauty of it. They finally get it, and that's what my prayer is, Father, that Howard and Douglas will get it today on this Holy Sabbath day, that you'll begin to touch their hearts today as I put this thing to press. That they will know that they'll be part of a bestseller book, and that ultimately their nefarious intentions will be the opportunity for people like themselves to re-examine their own heinous projects. their own calumnies against their own family members, their own bosom beloved family members. That they will understand that their part in this narrative is to help other people who have similar problems in their own families by the millions. And that we allow, Father, for this opportunity, because at Pentecost they were of one accord in one place. They were no longer bickering about who is the greatest. They knew who was the greatest. Their Savior came to teach them a better way, and that's love. And that's all we all really want. And somehow these people got corrupted, Father. And we've all been there.
So that they can hold their heads high, knowing that what has happened is something their children can be proud of.
Yes, that they can be part of a production now, be part of the solution, even though they were part of the problem. Yes?
Yes.
In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
There it is. There it is, as short and to the point as possible, although long enough for many people. But we prayed what we needed to. And Look, Kathy, I'm excited. We've got the Truth Tellers, what do you call it, Truth Tellers movement?
All right. Okay.
I think so. Because Truth Tellers don't have party affiliation.
Right.
Let's face it, we love those blue people just as much as the red people, don't we?
Yeah, red and blue makes purple. I like to think I'm a purple person.
Hey, the purple persons. Maybe we should call it that. We're a blend.
Mm-hmm. That was Sarah's nickname growing up. She was Miss Purple.
Well, the purple persons movement is great because it's a combination of red
and blue.
Kathy?
Which every artist knows.
Yes, but that's important. The purple people. Never mind that the guy has orange hair. Let's talk about the purple people now.
Right.
The guy with the orange hair in the White House, leave him alone. In fact, why don't you start praying for the guy? If he's obnoxious, pray for the guy. He's from New York. He's a hard-line business guy, street-fighting business guy. Give the guy a little bit of a break. You have a break in your life, people. Back off and stop talking about the guy with the orange wig.
Right. But isn't that what a president is supposed to do, is to bring, every president says, I'm going to be a uniter, not a divider. I'm going to bring people together. Well, then get rid of the color of your party.
There you go.
You got to become a purple person.
Hey, didn't the Beatles have the purple people eaters?
Yes.
Well, we got to change that a little bit. We're not going to be eating anybody.
Right.
So we got the purple people. We'll just leave it like that.
And we all lived on a yellow submarine. Let's not forget that one.
Let's do it. I think even Kathy, Howard might want to think about the magic bus. The magic bus.
Right. The magic mystery tour. Yes.
Well, we're getting into another one. Yeah, and then there's another one.
Now you're making me think of all the records that are back in Freeport that it would be fun to sit down and spend a day listening to.
Tell you what, you signalized to one of your children to get those records, and you do that. And if your daughter doesn't want to help you in that regard, then I'm sure she'll be willing. She'll be glad to do it. And don't forget our theme song, Peace Train sounding louder. Everyone get on the peace train. Yay, 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 yay. Come on,
on the peace train.
Get on the peace train. Peace train sounding louder.
I think we might be losing our audience here. It might be time to end this conversation.
All right. There it is. We'll end it right there.
Okay. All right. On the peace train.
And don't forget, in a proper church service, you have to have a song, and we just did.
Okay.
All right, sis.
All right.
Bye.